Direct News TV. August 3, 2023. Trump indictment updates, ex-president to be arraigned in 2020 election probe. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is set to appear in court in Washington, D.C. to face federal charges related to his effort to overturn the 2020 United States presidential election. Trump faces 4 charges in the indictment, which accuses him of attempting to interfere with the vote count and seeking to block Congress from certifying the results. Trump had hours to stop January 6 Capitol riot. Heather, 44, who is visiting Washington, D.C. with her family from Oregon, has said she agrees with prosecuting Trump, as she stopped to watch the scene outside the courthouse. "I watched it live, the storming of the Capitol. He had hours to stop it and he didn't, and that to me is evidence enough," she said of the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. "No matter what else he's done, if you're Republican or Democrat, that should not happen in our country." Trump's 2020 election case most significant in U.S. history, expert. Trump has already made history twice by becoming the first former U.S. president to be criminally prosecuted at the federal and state levels. But experts warn that the third batch of charges against him are the most damaging legally and politically. "They're probably the most significant legal case in the nation's history," said Paul Brace, a professor emeritus at Rice University. Trump team could ask for trial to be moved from U.S. Capitol, analyst Debbie Hines, a U.S. legal analyst, has said Trump's legal team could request to move his case on the U.S. election charges out of Washington, D.C., where the former president says it will be impossible for him to get a fair trial. But Hines told Al Jazeera that such a request would likely be turned down. "In just about every instance when what's called a change of venue request is made, it's usually denied," she said. "Donald Trump can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia, as he can get a fair trial anywhere. Tourists get front row seat to presidential arraignment." Carlos Nasser, from Paris, France, is among several international tourists who stopped to take in a uniquely American spectacle, snapping pictures outside the court ahead of Trump's arraignment. The court's location, between the White House and the U.S. Capitol building and surrounded by several museums, puts it on a popular thoroughfare for those taking in the sights. Nasser told Al Jazeera that in his opinion, some of Trump's actions created a bit of a negative image. "But we still respect him," he said in French. Trump says he is heading to Washington, D.C., to be arrested. Trump says he is heading to Washington, D.C., for his arraignment in the 2020 election case. "I am now going to Washington, D.C., to be arrested for having challenged a corrupt, rigged, and stolen election," the former president wrote in all caps on his Truth Social platform. "It is a great honor, because I am being arrested for you. Make America great again." Domestic extremism still a concern, former U.S. official. After the last 2 criminal indictments against him, Trump had called on his supporters to protest, raising concerns about potential political violence in the U.S. Javad Ali, a former senior intelligence and national security official, told Al Jazeera that while domestic extremism and so-called lone wolf attacks remain a concern, another event on the scale of the 2021 Capitol riot would be unlikely. "I would have to think right now, already, my former colleagues at the FBI and Homeland Security and other departments and agencies are trying to think a couple steps ahead to try to prevent these types of lone wolf or lone offender attacks from happening," said Ali, who now teaches at the University of Michigan. "And they're very difficult to stop." Trump suggests criminal charges are helping his 2024 campaign. Trump has suggested that the charges against him are boosting his chances in the 2024 presidential race. "I need one more indictment to ensure my election," the former president wrote in a social media post. "We're neutral, some Americans have not made up their minds on charges." Rob and Sarah, tourists who are visiting Washington, D.C., from Wisconsin, have said they are there just to take in the sights. "We decided to come to the courthouse today just to take it in," said Rob, 54, who described his politics as right down the middle. He added that he didn't know what to make of Trump's historic third indictment yet. "We're neutral right now," added Sarah, 55. Democratic lawmaker calls for making proceedings public. Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly has called for making the proceedings in the Trump case public. Cameras and recording devices are usually banned in U.S. federal district courts, but Connolly said in a social media post that Americans have a right to know what is said in cases that concern us all. Hearing taking place in shadow of U.S. Capitol. Unlike Trump's two earlier court appearances on criminal charges this year, Thursday's proceedings are taking place in the shadow of a key player in the case, the U.S. Capitol. The E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse sits just blocks from Capitol Hill, with the seat of the U.S. legislature visible in the distance. That's where pro-Trump rioters gathered on January 6, 2021, in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. The violence that day was fueled by Trump's false claims that the vote was marred by widespread fraud, U.S. prosecutors allege. Some Americans travel to show support for Trump. Glenn, a Trump backer from Setauket, New York, who belongs to a group called Setauket Patriots, has traveled to the U.S. Capitol to show support for the former president. Glenn, who declined to give Al Jazeera his last name, sat in the back seat of a limo tricked out to look like Cadillac One, the U.S. president's official state car, ahead of the arraignment. "We bought a limo, those are real plates on the back, bought some paraphernalia, and there you go," he said. "We drove down from New York to support Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief. We're not happy, it's all fake," he added, referring to the proceedings. Charges against Trump, political persecution, conservative commentator. Carrie Sheffield, a conservative commentator and senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, has said she believes the charges against Trump amount to political persecution. "As it stands right now, I do not believe that there is sufficient evidence to say that these charges have any merit. I believe so far, what we've seen is a political persecution," Sheffield told Al Jazeera. Many supporters, conservative people, say that the president, Joe Biden, is trying to lock up the chief political rival, and that is very disturbing. Few Trump supporters outside courthouse in early hours. Dion Cheney, a 54-year-old from Brooklyn, New York, is among only a few Trump supporters at the courthouse hours before the former U.S. president is set to arrive. "I want to see it with my own eyes, instead of watching it through the fake news," Cheney told Al Jazeera. He said he's been at every arraignment so far and is not bothered if other Trump supporters don't join him. "I don't care if anyone else shows up. I'm here and that's all that matters," said Cheney, adding that he thinks the latest trial will give Trump a 5-point bump in polls as he seeks the Republican presidential nomination for 2024. A man biking by briefly stopped to heckle Cheney. Who are Trump's 6 accused co-conspirators? U.S. prosecutors have said Trump did not act alone in its effort to overturn the 2020 election results. 6 people were identified as co-conspirators by the U.S. Department of Justice in this week's indictment against the former president and accused of assisting Trump with everything from fomenting the crowd that stormed the seat of the U.S. Congress on January 6, 2021, to intimidating state legislators and spreading false claims of electoral fraud. These accomplices have yet to be named as they have not been formally charged. However, the detailed description in the indictment regarding their involvement made it possible to identify some of the likely suspects. What is conspiracy to defraud the United States? Most of the election indictment against Trump focuses on one of the 4 charges he is facing: conspiracy to defraud the United States. John Coffey, a law professor at Columbia University, said that fraud allegation is about interfering with the country's normal governmental processes. The U.S. government normally collects the ballots, decides who has been elected, and the electors for each state, Coffey told Al Jazeera. It takes it to Congress for a confirmation. The effort, by Trump, here was to prevent that from happening. The scene outside the Washington, D.C. court. Reporters speaking French, Spanish and several other languages have opened the morning outside the E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse, where Trump is set to be arraigned later today. Lines of cameras stretched alongside barricades on 2 sides of the sprawling court complex, with U.S. Marshals, Washington, D.C. police, and Secret Service personnel stationed throughout the area. One U.S. Marshal walked a bomb-sniffing dog through the camera crews. Largely absent was any major presence of protesters or supporters of the former president. What charges does Trump face? Trump faces 4 federal charges in the 2020 election case. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy against rights. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.